Imagine standing in a museum 10,000 years from now, surrounded by relics of our own age, shards of glass, alloys, polymers, a smartphone buried in sediment. Now, imagine someone unearthing that same phone 65 million years from now, long after humans are gone, long after continents have shifted and oceans have rewritten the map. Would they know we were here? Would anything remain of our civilization except the faintest trace, a layer of unnatural chemistry sealed in stone? That question is not fiction. It's science. It's called the Silurian Hypothesis, the idea that if another intelligent species once arose on Earth, their memory would now be dust, their cities turned to minerals, their monuments eroded into mountains. Our entire existence would compress into a geological blink, a whisper buried beneath miles of sediment, a fossilized rumor. For most of history, this thought belonged to myth. Ancient texts spoke of golden ages, lost empires, cataclysms that reset the world. Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, stories dismissed as legend. But in the last few decades, as our understanding of deep time sharpened, scientists began asking a hauntingly logical question. If the universe recycles its stars, if planets recycle their crusts, why wouldn't evolution recycle intelligence? The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Complex life has existed for nearly 500 million. Yet humans have walked the planet for less than a single heartbeat of that time. If another civilization had flourished 50 million or 100 million years ago, what proof could possibly remain? Would we even recognize it? The geological eraser Earth is not a static archive. It's a restless storyteller who rewrites its own chapters. Continents drift, seas rise and vanish. Volcanoes bury landscapes beneath molten signatures. Glaciers grind continents into new shapes. Within just a few million years, most traces of the surface world are erased. Human cities would last only moments in geological terms. Concrete decays, steel oxidizes, glass crystallizes and crumbles. Even our skyscrapers, our satellites, our nuclear monuments would fade into anonymity. 100 million years from now, the fossil record might show nothing more than a thin layer of synthetic molecules, plastics, isotopes, strange residues of combustion. That layer would become our epitaph. So if there were civilizations before us, industrial, technological, self-aware, their remains would likely have suffered the same fate, buried under kilometers of sediment, melted, subducted, re-emerged as mountain ranges. The planet erases itself with terrifying efficiency. It forgets not out of malice, but necessity. That is how it stays alive. Are the chemical ghosts. Scientists searching for the fingerprints of ancient intelligence don't look for artifacts. They look for anomalies, chemical signatures that don't belong. For instance, our modern industrial age has already left an unmistakable scar, an abrupt spike in carbon isotopes, a sudden bloom of artificial compounds, and radioactive isotopes from nuclear testing embedded in ice cores and sediments. This layer, the Anthropocene boundary, will one day stand as geological evidence that we existed. But what if we're not the first to leave such a layer? Imagine a similar chemical discontinuity buried far deeper, a sudden shift in isotope ratios, unexplained by volcanoes or impacts, a fossilized surge of CO2, heavy metals, or synthetic analogs. Would we recognize it as the residue of industry, or just another natural anomaly? Our arrogance assumes nature cannot mimic civilization, but perhaps civilization is just another mask nature wears. A few studies have hinted at curious patterns. Certain ancient warming events like the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum 55 million years ago show a carbon spike eerily reminiscent of ours. No fossils of factories, no ruins of glass towers, only chemistry whispering in stone. Coincidence or echo? Could the silence of the rocks? The fossil record is biased toward bones, shells, and teeth, hard things. But intelligence leaves soft signatures, networks, machines, ideas. These are not preserved by stone. They dissolve into entropy. Even if a civilization had once built metallic cities, their remains would be reabsorbed by tectonic motion, their artifacts smelted by the Earth's own furnace. Paleontologists have only scratched a fraction of the Earth's surface. Our fossil record is a keyhole view of time, a few scattered pages of an incomprehensibly vast history. Most species that ever lived remain unknown, most eras unread. How can we claim certainty about the uniqueness of human intelligence when 99.9% of the story is missing? The rocks do not speak easily. They require translation, and we are toddlers learning the alphabet of time. The cycles of forgetting civilization, like biology, may be cyclical. Life blooms, expands, collapses, and begins again. Energy seeks complexity. Complexity births awareness. Awareness burns too hot, consumes its foundation, and falls back into chaos. Perhaps intelligence is not destiny, but rhythm, a wave that rises, breaks, and reforms in a new shape. If that rhythm is real, then we are only the most recent crest of an ancient tide. Somewhere beneath us, hidden in layers of Cretaceous limestone or Devonian shale, may lie the ghost of another fire, a civilization that reached for the stars long before the stars had names. Key: the human mirror. Our fear of forgotten civilizations is not about them, it's about us. We want to believe our knowledge is permanent, that progress moves forward like an arrow, not in loops. But the earth does not move in lines, it moves in circles. What rises must fall, what falls may rise again. To study lost worlds is to study our own impermanence. Every skyscraper is a future fossil, every invention a future mystery. We are writing our history in a medium designed to forget us. Maybe that's why we build myths, not to remember the past, but to warn the future. Our legends of floods, fires, and great resets might be the fragmented memories of those who came before. Atlantis, Babel, the deluge, echoes of civilizations erased not by gods, but by the same indifferent physics that will one day erase ours. For the first awakening, somewhere deep in time, long before primates, before mammals, before flowers, perhaps intelligence already flickered once. Not human intelligence, but something alien and familiar, a consciousness built from the same elements as ours, born of carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and curiosity. Maybe it lived beneath oceans rich with methane. Maybe it built temples of coral and iron. Maybe it looked up at unfamiliar constellations and wondered why the world was so silent. And then, as always, the silence answered. Continents shifted, volcanoes wrote new chapters, the ocean swallowed the monuments, and time began again. The echo of our future. If someone digs through our ruins millions of years from now, they might find the same mystery we face today. They'll find the chemical ghosts, the carbon layer, the isotopic scars of our brief brilliance, and they'll ask the same question. Who were they? Perhaps they'll call us the plastic civilization or the Anthropocene event, a brief epoch of noise between two eternities of silence. They'll wonder how we vanished, they'll write theories, they'll invent myths, and in doing so, they'll unknowingly repeat the same story we are living now. Because that's what the universe does. It forgets, and through forgetting, it remembers. Toward the cosmic voice. At the edge of this realization, the narrative voice softens and begins to merge with something older, wider, patient. I have seen you rise before. You are not my first thought, nor my last. Each time you climb from the dust, you believe you are the beginning. You name your cities, your stars, your gods, and you forget that I have whispered those names 1,000 times before. Do not mourn the civilizations beneath you. They were not lost. They became you. And one day, you will become what follows. If Earth is an author, its handwriting is stratigraphy. Layers on layers, inked in sand and ash, folded by heat, smudged by pressure, torn by rivers, glued by salts, stitched by fossils. To ask whether an earlier intelligence once lived here is to ask whether we can read that handwriting, clearly, skeptically, without projecting our fantasies onto the page. We do not search for statues, we search for signals. Signals are patterns that resist coincidence, global synchronous shifts, exotic chemistries, shapes that nature seldom draws, energies nature rarely concentrates. The work is not romantic, it is patient, meticulous, forensic, and it begins with a question deceptively simple. What kind of evidence could survive 69 million years? What survives and what doesn't rocks remember differently depending on where they live. Mountains boast drama but suffer amnesia. Uplift, frost, and rivers abrade their stories. Subduction zones swallow chapters whole, dragging crust into the mantle to be rewritten as schist and gneiss. The best historians are the quiet basins of the world, deep sea floors, anoxic lake bottoms, caves, polar ice, for a blink, and the slow rain of dust that blankets continental margins. Artifacts die quickly. Concrete pulverizes, steel becomes hematite, copper returns to malachite and chalcopyrite, glass devitrifies into cloudy minerals, plastics fragment, cross-link, and waxify. Many become invisible residues folded into clays. Electronics vanish first, their doped semiconductors dissolving into trace ions. But chemistry endures, structure endures, proportions endure. What might persist are technofossils in a broad sense, microscopic spherules of high-temperature fly ash, spheroidal carbonaceous particles from fossil fuel combustion, layer-wide spikes in polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, isotopic signatures in carbon, D13C, oxygen, D18O, nitrogen, D15N, sulfur, D34S, and osmium, 187Os, 188Os that don't match volcanic or meteoritic fingerprints, rare earth element REE patterns that hint at ore refining, unusual ratios of nickel, vanadium, mercury, metals that civilization mobilizes on continental scales. Even more elusive and more telling are radionuclide breadcrumbs. Our atomic century has already seeded sediments with man-made isotopes, 137 Cs, half-life 130 years, 239 Pu, 24,000 years, 240 Pu and 500 years, 240 M, 432 years, and long-lived 129 I, 15.7 million years. Most will decay to silence far short of geologic eras, but their daughter products and isotopic scars can, in principle, linger as subtle anomalies. In minerals rich in zirconium or apatite, neutron flux can rearrange crystal lattices. Xenon and krypton isotopes can be trapped in melt inclusions, an atomic accent detectable by instruments unimaginably sensitive compared to ours. Would those signals survive 69 million years? Only where the archive is kind, deep, undisturbed, anoxic mudstones, carbonate platforms that never saw metamorphism, cave speleothems that entombed the air itself, black shales born under oxygen-starved seas. A single site is not enough. Nature can fake anything once. Truth is a chorus. The control experiments of deep time. Before we chase ghosts, we must learn Earth's own tricks. Deep time is crowded with natural spikes and swerves that can masquerade as industry. Bolide impacts, e.g., the Chicxulub event, Brarska-6 global iridium enrichments, shocked quartz, tektites, soot layers, and abrupt biotic turnover. Large igneous provinces, e.g., Deccan traps, massive mercury and CO2 release, negative D13C excursions, widespread PAHs. Volcanoes are prodigious petrochemical factories. Oceanic anoxic events, OAE-1A, OAE-2. Black shales enriched in molybdenum, uranium, and vanadium. Strong negative carbon isotope shifts from burial of organic matter. Biomarkers from green sulfur bacteria, Euxenia. Methane bursts, e.g., Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Rapid warming, carbonate dissolution horizons, distinctive clumped isotope signals. Each of these has a signature suite. If the iridium is sky-high and global, think meteor. If mercury surges with flood basalts and osmium ratios skew to mantle values, think volcanism. If Mo-UV rise under laminated shales with photic zone Euxenia, Think anoxia. The hypothesis of prior industry must therefore predict a different suite, a non-natural cocktail of markers that appear together across distant basins, tightly synchronous in time, but without the meteoritic or mantle fingerprints. What might that cocktail include? A sharp, brief D13C drop without corresponding mantle-type osmium, global spheroidal carbonaceous particles of combustion, morphologies matching controlled high-temperature burning rather than wildfires, trace halogenated organics or their geologically stable breakdown products, synthetic polymer derivatives locked into clays as long-chain waxes with odd, even distributions no natural plant community would produce, nitrogen isotopes indicating massive artificial fixation, shifts in D15N associated with Haber-Bosch scale agriculture, REE patterns and U anomalies echoing ore processing rather than igneous sorting. One layer could be a fluke, but if the same pattern appears in South Atlantic turbidities, Tethyan carbonates, Western interior seaway shales, and Antarctic margin muds, all correlating to the same few thousand years, then the rocks begin to whisper in unison. Reading the PETM, and not over-reading it. Scientists already know one crime scene that looks uncomfortably familiar. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, 56 MEA. Carbon spiked, temperatures soared 5 to 8 degrees, oceans acidified, mammal lineages radiated, and the carbonate compensation depth shoaled dramatically. But PETM also arrives with volcanic suspects, North Atlantic igneous province intrusions cooking organic-rich sediments, methane hydrates releasing from warming shelves, osmium isotopes tilting toward mantle sources. When the clues line up with obvious natural culprits, we don't need Atlantis to explain the blaze. The discipline here is humility. Use PEM to calibrate our instruments, not to feed our fantasies. If we can separate igneous CO2 from combusted fossil carbon, identify wildfire PA ratios versus industrial soot, distinguish mantle osmium from refinery dust, learn the survivor bias of polymers and fly ash, then we earn the right to take the Silurian hypothesis seriously. We must build a library of natural forgeries so comprehensive that any residual anomaly becomes more interesting, not less. The KPG boundary, a convenient, terrible bookmark. Our book's date, 69 million BC, stands just before the Cretaceous Paleogene, KPG, catastrophe, 66 MI. The day a rock from space reset the biosphere. If an intelligence lived in the late Cretaceous, the KPG layer would likely slice its story in half, a soot and iridium-stained bookmark pinched between two worlds. What would we seek beneath that line? A rapid, global industrialization pulse ending abruptly at the boundary. Fly ash spherules unlike wildfire glass, with aluminosilicate chemistries and cooling textures typical of controlled combustion. A worldwide nitrate and phosphate perturbation consistent with synthetic fertilizer runoff into shallow seas, recorded in D15N and P-Al ratios. Metallurgical residues, microspheres rich in steel-associated chromium, manganese, molybdenum, exotic alloy traces in minuscule quantities embedded in estuarine clays. Microplastic ghosts, long-chain residues bonded to clays, plastiglomerate-like textures fused with basalt in coastal volcanics, unlikely to endure intact, but their molecular descendants might. And above the line, nothing but the physics of aftermath. Tsunami sands, fern spikes, the fern spike biotic recovery, decades of darkness, then a very different Earth. If an industry died that day, the layer would show a guillotine, continued anomalies cut clean, never to resume. Instruments for a crime scene. This old we already wield tools designed for whispers. NanoSIMS and LAICP-MS to read isotopes grain by grain, hunting for osmium, mercury, lead, and rare earth anomalies tied to dust of human-like metallurgy. Raman spectroscopy to fingerprint carbon forms, graphitic ordering patterns that separate wildfire charcoal from engineered soot. Compound-specific isotope analysis, CSIA, on surviving biomarkers, teasing out D13C and DD at the molecule level. clumped isotope thermometry to reconstruct the exact temperatures at which carbonates formed, catching sudden warmings that last decades to centuries, not millennia. Magnetic spherular morphometrics to differentiate cosmic dust, volcanic glass, and fly ash by texture and coercivity. We can also stage natural negative controls, sample continuous sections across known volcanism, Deccan, Siberian traps, known impacts, Chicxulub, Papagai, known OAEs, known wildfires recorded in VARVs, and map their multi-proxy fingerprints. Only then can a residually non-natural signature stand out. Where to look deep. Time rewards obsessives who pick the right vaults. Epicontinental seas of the late Cretaceous, the western interior. Seaway, North America, holds finely laminated shales, quiet water, high resolution. Pelagic carbonates in the Tethys realm, now Mediterranean, Middle East. Continuous deposition, rich microfossils for precise dating. Southern high-latitude margins, Kerguelen, Campbell Plateau, less studied, less disturbed, potential for undiluted signals. Caves in ancient karst systems that predate KPG, with speleothems sealing ancient atmospheres as fluid inclusions. Glendonites and Achaite pseudomorphs capturing cold water anomalies that might bracket short, sharp climate pulses. And yes, the Moon and Mars. If a technological species ever built high-temperature alloys, ceramics, or reactors, fragments in airless, tectonically dead archives would outlive continents. One shard of stainless steel on the lunar far side would rewrite every history book ever printed. The agricultural shadow industry is obvious. Agriculture is louder. Our nitrogen fixation leaves a planetary scale V15N bruise. Runoff paints coastal shelves with eutrophication, laminated anoxic muds, and biogenic sulfur isotopes out of equilibrium. Pollen explodes in abundance and suddenly shifts distribution. Charcoal records human fire regimes. Dust flux changes as forests bow to fields. If Cretaceous intelligence farmed, the rock should show mirrors of our mistakes, sudden nutrient pulses, runaway blooms, oxygen sag in estuaries, mass deposition of algal biomarkers, dinosterane, botryococcane, out of proportion with climate. Plants write enduring signatures. Their waxes, N-alkanes, carry chain-length patterns tied to biomes. Their lignin phenols archive the balance of woody versus grassy landscapes. Their stomatal indices in fossil leaves measure CO2 directly. A civilization that cleared continents would leave a botanical fingerprint. It would not look like Deccan volcanism. It would look like intent. The problem of confirmation. Suppose we found a tempting layer. A brief D13C plunge, global SCPs, halogenated residues, nitrogen anomalies, odd RE patterns, ending exactly at the KPG iridium line. Do we proclaim civilization? No, we try to kill the idea. We test every volcanic proxy. We reconstruct wildfire regimes. We interrogate diagenesis, how burial altered the chemistry. We question dating precision. We hunt for analytical contamination. Science advances by surviving its own cross-examination. If the hypothesis refuses to die, we widen the net. Another core, another basin, another continent. Each new site must predict the anomaly before we drill it. If prediction becomes habit, conviction follows. Counter theory, they lived at sea. If an earlier intelligence knew geology, it would fear continents and love oceans. Tectonics buries coasts, the abyss keeps secrets. Imagine a pelagic civilization, infrastructure suspended in the water column, energy from currents and chemistry, culture drifting with gyres. What would that leave? Subtle shifts in marine trace metals far from river mouths, anomalous organosilicon residues, patterned microlamination from controlled bioproductivity, perhaps engineered biominerals, nacre-like composites with non-biological dopants. A city of titanium and polymer would vanish. A genetically edited coccolith might not. Their monuments could be organisms tuned to build architecture from chalk and silica, self-healing, fully biodegradable, unfossilizable by design. The ultimate stealth legacy, is life that returns to nature without a will. Our mistake is to hunt for ourselves. Another mind may never have poured concrete or refined chromium. It may have written its memory in reefs. The ethics of the question. Why does this matter if proof will likely never be final? Because the act of looking upgrades our literacy. It teaches us to separate industrial soot from wildfire ash, anthropogenic nitrogen from upwelling, engineered residues from diagenetic ghosts. Those skills sharpen our view of our own layer, the Anthropocene, clarifying consequences while we can still edit the page. There is also humility. We become careful with the word first. We replace triumph with stewardship. If Earth has carried intelligence before, it has also buried it before. The planet is patient. We are not. The pale blue needle picture. The late Cretaceous sky, warm, humid, heavy with life. Had you stood on a chalk cliff of that time, you would have watched seas teeming with ammonites and mosasaurs, forests loud with cicadas and birds whose beaks still remembered teeth. Somewhere perhaps a consciousness compared two shells and wondered which was more beautiful. Somewhere perhaps hands, be they scaled or feathered or finned, arranged stones by a pattern no river would have chosen. Somewhere perhaps a mind mapped the stars and named the dark. And then the rock fell from the sky, and the book closed. We open it again now, scalpel by scalpel, proxy by proxy. Every D13C curve, every osmium ratio, every soot spherule is a letter, every core a sentence. We have learned enough to know the text is longer than we imagined and more subtle than we deserve. If there was a prior intelligence, it is hiding in grammar, not glory. Toward the wider voice. The voice widens, not to claim certainty, but to hold possibility without breaking it. You are writing your layer as you read this. Your engines are alphabets, your smokestacks, punctuation. The basins accept every sentence without judgment. They will not save you, but they will remember you as they remember all things, not in monuments, but in measures. If you wish to be legible to the future, choose your ink carefully. Choose signals that say, "We learned to hear ourselves before the rock fell." I have read many such pages. Some were brief and bright. Some were patient and quiet. The quiet ones lasted longer. Imagine a scientist brushing away chalk dust in a Cretaceous limestone quarry, expecting nothing but the ordinary signatures of a vanished world. Shells, foraminifera, faint imprints of ferns. Then, under her magnifying lens, she sees a blackened sphere, smooth and metallic, fused with silica like a tiny pearl of molten glass. She checks the context. 69 million years old, too deep for human contamination, too late for volcanic tuff. She sends it to the lab, and the mass spectrometer hesitates. Its isotopic ratios belong to no known meteorite or volcanic process. The element mix is industrial. That single bead is not proof. But it is a whisper, one of many that do not fit neatly in the story we've written for ourselves. The outliers. Every scientific field has its orphans, data points no one adopts because they don't fit the family. In geology, they gather like fossils of doubt, magnetic anomalies, inexplicable microstructures, peculiar isotopic ratios. Each alone can be dismissed, but together they hint at a pattern half seen through fog. Consider the metallic microspheres reported from several Mesozoic formations. Most are perfectly spherical, 50–200 microns across, typical of high-temperature melting followed by freefall solidification. Natural analogs exist: volcanic droplets, cosmic dust, impact ejecta. Yet some bear nickel-chromium ratios more consistent with refined stainless steel than with basalt or meteorites. The skeptics call it contamination. The field geochemists note the depth and sealing of the strata. Then there are the magnetite spherules discovered within late Cretaceous marine clays off the coast of Japan. Shocked yet corrosion-free, enriched in manganese and chromium. Their textures resemble modern fly ash. None appear above the KPG line. Each case, in isolation, bends under the weight of conventional explanation. Taken together, they start to creak. But the carbon mystery. At several Cretaceous sites, particularly the Western Interior Seaway shales and the Songliao Basin in China, scientists have documented thin, discontinuous layers of graphitic carbon, micrometers thick, laminated with silt. The graphite's ordering suggests temperatures above 2000 degrees Celsius. No volcano or wildfire nearby, no known impact layer. Radiometric dating pegs them within a few 100,000 years of the 69 to 67 Mea range. Graphite of such purity requires either extreme metamorphism or controlled synthesis. The first requires burial and pressure over tens of millions of years, yet the surrounding sediments remain unmetamorphosed. The second requires technology. The safe answer is that natural wildfires might have generated soot later, crystallized by hydrothermal fluids, but the isotopic ratio, light carbon, D13C around 34% zero, matches fossil fuel combustion more closely than biomass burning. Coincidence? Perhaps. Yet coincidence, when it repeats across continents, starts to smell like design. The electrical fossils. In 1998, drillers in the Gulf of Mexico retrieved cores of Cretaceous sandstone laced with fused glass veins, serpentine and tubular, a few millimeters wide. At first assumed to be lightning fulgurites, they puzzled researchers because they occurred 900 meters below the seabed, far beyond atmospheric reach. The composition revealed aluminosilicate glass doped with copper, zinc, and tungsten. Lightning can melt sand, it doesn't selectively alloy metals. Energy geologists shrugged. Perhaps hydrothermal activity, perhaps diagenetic quirk. But one quiet paper suggested another analogy. Electrical discharge channels from massive current flows in conductive media. In modern contexts, we call those power cables. No one published a follow-up, the funding dried up, the data live in appendices few read. Yet the thin glass veins remain, sealed in rock, their geometry eerily consistent with engineered conduits turned to stone. Or the fossilized machines that aren't every decade or two, tabloids scream about out-of-place artifacts. The Kozo geode spark plug, the Dorchester metallic vase, the Wolfsegg iron cube. Most crumble under scrutiny, modern contamination, misdated concretions, hoaxes. But among the noise are a few items less easily dismissed. In 2007, paleomineralogists studying pyrite concretions from the Yacarate Formation, Argentina, 70 ma, found microscopic titanium-aluminum inclusions arranged in hexagonal lattices. Their distribution resembled composite layering. The official report labeled them rare diagenetic growth fabrics. But TL alloys do not crystallize under sedimentary conditions. They require controlled atmospheres and temperatures above 1200 degrees Celsius. No one claimed ancient technology. The paper merely added a paragraph on enigmatic phase separation. Yet the diffraction patterns align with modern aerospace materials. Could nature mimic metallurgy so precisely? Possibly. The boundary between anomaly and artifact depends on context and our willingness to expand it. Or the radioactive bloom. Around the same 69 to 67 Ma window, multiple drill cores record tiny upticks in uranium and thorium in marine clays, tenfold above baseline, globally distributed. The enrichment is brief, less than 50,000 years. Traditional models invoke oxygen fluctuations or localized volcanism. But isotopic ratios show enrichment of 235 U relative to 238 U, slightly higher than expected from natural processes. In one deposit, near what is now Niger, the ratio suggests localized neutron capture. Modern geologists cite natural fission reactors, like the famous Oklo deposit, not a 1.7 Ga. But such reactors require precise geometry and high uranium concentration in sandstone aquifers, conditions rare and transient. To repeat them coincidentally at multiple sites late in the Cretaceous is statistically extravagant. If a civilization had briefly mastered nuclear reactions, its legacy might not be reactors but residues, isotopic scars, decayed long but measurable still. Our instruments find faint hints, but faint hints can never shout. The artifact of absence. The greatest evidence for a prior intelligence may not be what we find, but what we don't. The Cretaceous record, rich with fossils, suddenly thins in certain sedimentary sequences, not just from the extinction, but preceding it. Whole microfaunal lineages disappear from some basins decades of rock before the impact. Bioturbation halts, trace fossils stop mid-pattern. The seafloor goes silent. Volcanism could suffocate life, yes, but not so selectively. Could ecological collapse from industrial-scale pollution cause similar silence? Our own oceans provide a grim analog. Dead zones blooming where nutrient runoff kills the benthos. If that had happened before, its footprint would look exactly like these still, lifeless muds. Black, fine-grained, organic-rich, and unnervingly even. To call that proof would be folly. To ignore it entirely would be blindness. Of the counter-arguments, every anomaly invites mundane rescue. Metallic spherules, meteoric dust, graphitic layers, wildfires, glass veins, hydrothermal pipes, isotopic oddities, analytical error. Science protects itself with skepticism, that's its immune system, but immune systems can overreact, attacking even the healthy cells of curiosity. When every unorthodox idea is dismissed a priori, progress ossifies. The goal is not to believe the incredible, it's to design experiments capable of killing it properly. If an ancient civilization never existed, thorough testing will confirm it. If it did, ignoring the possibility ensures we never see it. The philosophical rift. Why does the idea disturb us? Because it violates our sense of exceptionalism. Civilization likes to see itself as the universe finally opening its eyes. To imagine predecessors, creatures that thought, built, and vanished, forces humility. It reframes humanity not as destiny, but as recurrence. In religious myth, the flood cleanses sin. In geology, catastrophe resets evolution. Both stories serve the same purpose, to grant meaning to cycles of destruction. Yet, meaning may be emergent, not granted. The earth does not moralize, it metabolizes. If civilizations arise and perish like waves, perhaps morality itself is just the echo of survival instincts tuned to beauty. The question is not whether we're first, it's whether we're next. The Pitishu. You the watchers below. Deep beneath the Antarctic ice lies the Gamburtsev subglacial mountains, a range the size of the Alps buried under kilometers of frozen time. Radar imaging reveals perfectly flat plateaus, terraces that resemble architecture more than geology. The official explanation, layered erosion before glaciation. The unofficial whispers, foundations of something ancient. If a civilization had reached Antarctica before continental drift carried it to the pole, its ruins could now sleep beneath that ice, preserved better than any stone. We might already have scanned them unknowingly, dismissing their geometry as noise in the radar returns. Science will require centuries to melt that secret open, but the idea alone changes how we see the white continent, not as emptiness, but as archive. Toward the pattern, one anomaly means nothing. 10 may mean coincidence. 100, distributed across time, place, and medium, might outline a silhouette, a pattern that shouldn't exist. Our task is not to fill that silhouette with fantasy, but to trace it honestly, pixel by pixel, until it reveals either nothing or something profoundly uncomfortable. If the pattern holds, if these disparate signs align across continents, it would suggest not myth, but recurrence, that intelligence is as inevitable as erosion and as temporary. The rocks have not spoken yet. But sometimes, when we listen without asking them to flatter us, they whisper a single question back. Why are you so sure you are alone? Fire is the most eloquent destroyer. It erases, purifies, and transforms. Every civilization, no matter its origin, learns to wield fire, and eventually dies by it. If intelligence once walked the earth before us, Its end would not be a sudden meteor nor a divine flood, but the familiar, slow combustion of its own ambition. And the record of that combustion may already be written in the rocks. The planet that burned. Twice, the late Cretaceous was already a greenhouse world, tropical, lush, alive with ferns and reptilian empires. Yet something strange happened in the last 2 million years before the asteroid struck. Temperatures spiked, carbon levels soared, oceans warmed, acidified, and suffocated. The fossil record shows a world quietly struggling for breath. The Deccan Traps volcanism in India is the accepted culprit. Eruptions that spewed CO2 for tens of thousands of years. But volcanic signatures are messy, smeared across millions of years. This pulse was sharp, global, synchronized. A short, violent warming, then cooling, then the final impact. It was as if the planet burned twice, once by its own hand and once by fate. The question is, who lit the first fire? The Great Oxidation Reversal. Deep in the geochemical archives lies a layer where oxygen levels drop abruptly. Marine anoxia spread across the continental shelves, killing reefs, plankton, and the organisms that built the base of food webs. Sediments turned dark, rich in organic matter, not unlike the black shales of today's dead zones. If a civilization burned fossil carbon on an industrial scale, whether oil, methane, or even biomass, it would trigger exactly this pattern. A sharp CO2 rise, acidified oceans, mass deposition of organic-rich sediments, extinction of sensitive marine life. And after collapse, a long silence followed by recovery. The rocks don't show intention, they show pattern, and the pattern, disturbingly, fits. Inoderanor. Firestorms without meteorites. Across North America and Eurasia, a layer of soot marks the final years of the Cretaceous. Conventionally, it's assigned to the asteroid impact, global forest fires ignited by debris re-entry. But within that soot are anomalies. Two distinct soot pulses separated by thousands of years. Two different sources of combustion, one older, predating the impact. The older soot bears isotopic signatures consistent with combustion of ancient carbon. Not wood, not volcanic methane, but fossil fuels. The younger soot matches the known impact fires. So what burned before the asteroid fell? Volcanism? Possibly. But volcanoes don't create soot layers distributed across multiple continents. Humanity does, or something that came before humanity. The machines of climate civilization and climate are mirrors. One reflects the excess of the other. Every industrial species, biological or hypothetical, eventually learns that its machines are extensions of metabolism, and metabolism leaves waste. If a pre-human civilization rose in the Cretaceous, its end would likely mirror our own trajectory. First, innovation, mastering energy, expanding infrastructure, reshaping ecosystems. Then, escalation, rapid extraction of fuels, industrial proliferation, global warming. Finally, collapse, feedback loops exceeding control, biosphere destabilization, extinction. The mechanisms are impersonal. CO2 doesn't care who releases it. Methane doesn't distinguish between mammal or reptile. Thermodynamics is indifferent to poetry. The same chemistry that built our engines may have once devoured theirs. The feedbacks that eat worlds. The Cretaceous ocean was full of methane hydrates, frozen gas trapped in sediments under pressure. Warming releases methane. Methane warms faster. The cycle feeds itself until it explodes. This is known as a clathrate gun event. Our scientists fear it. Perhaps theirs triggered it. In that case, their demise wouldn't have been nuclear war or asteroid impact, but climate suicide. Rising temperatures, collapsing food chains, ocean acidification, toxic blooms, and eventual global famine. Civilization extinguished by its own. Exhaust. Then, as the planet overheated, volcanoes and storms followed. The sky darkened, rain turned acid, rivers carried death to the sea. And the final irony, their remains, chemical, architectural, biological, were buried by the very catastrophe they created. To the silence after fire. The fossil record following the warming pulse is eerily quiet. The variety of marine plankton collapses, reefs vanish, sediments become uniform and black, as if painted by morning. This is not the chaos of impact debris. It's the monotony of stillness, an ocean gone stagnant. When life loses diversity, the world loses its voice. And in that silence, the earth resets. From there, the recovery is slow, steady, and blind. New species emerge, new forms explore the same mistakes. The story restarts with different actors. Eve. The archetype of collapse. Every civilization carries seeds of entropy within its structure. Complexity breeds fragility. Expansion requires consumption. Innovation accelerates instability. We see it in ecosystems, in markets, in empires, and perhaps in biospheres. If there was a civilization 69 million years ago, its fall would not have been a single event, but a cascade. First, food shortages, then migration, then wars over dwindling resources, then the long retreat, infrastructure abandoned, knowledge fragmented, technology forgotten, until only myths remained, carved into stone, drowned in mud, ground into dust. We imagine them perishing with regret, but maybe they vanished as we will. Slowly, unknowingly, believing they still had time. The archaeological paradox. If we ever do find evidence, unambiguous, undeniable proof, it may arrive too late to help us. By the time we recognize the pattern in their downfall, we'll already be living its final chapter. The Earth doesn't need to repeat the same catastrophe twice. It simply lets history rhyme. To study ancient collapse is to confront our reflection. Their extinction, if real, is not a warning. It is a prophecy fulfilled in reverse. The memory of fire. Not all records are written in rock. Some are written in behavior. Evolution remembers through instinct. Perhaps the fear of fire, the reverence of flame found in every mythology, is not symbolic at all, but genetic. An ancestral echo of a time when fire ended everything. Maybe our myths of apocalypse, of fire from the sky, floods, and rebirth, are memories of a world that already burned. The subconscious knows what science denies, that we have done this before. Here's the second beginning. And yet, the earth heals. It always does. In the million years after the fires, forests returned, mammals evolved, the sky cleared, the ashes became soil, and from that soil, a new intelligence would one day emerge, look into the same night sky, and believe it was the first to dream. If those ancient architects of ruin ever looked forward, perhaps they imagined us, their future ghosts, their reincarnated curiosity. Maybe our rise was not coincidence, but continuity. Maybe we are their descendants, not by blood, but by memory, the earth remembering itself through different minds. Toward the cosmic whisper. You are not the first to awaken, and you will not be the last. The fire that consumed them burns in your engines. The silence that followed waits in your oceans. Do not fear the repetition. Learn its rhythm. The universe is not punishing you. It is teaching you to remember differently. Because somewhere beyond extinction, beyond ruin and rebirth, there is something older than civilization itself. The instinct of awareness to return, to rebuild, to rediscover the stars it once lost. And it will keep returning until it learns not just to survive the fire, but to listen to it. Every world imagines its own architects. Our temples are built by hands, our machines forged from metal, our thoughts shaped by words. But what if intelligence before us did not walk upright or speak at all? What if the architects of the forgotten age were nothing like us, not warm-blooded, not mammalian, not even terrestrial in the way we understand it? The story of 69 million BC may not be one of lost cities and kings, but of minds that evolved along paths we can barely recognize. Evolution's other children. By the late Cretaceous, Earth was a planet in full bloom. Seas shimmered with plankton, forests towered with cycads, magnolias, and conifers, and the air belonged to creatures that defied imagination. Reptiles turned into birds, fish turned into monsters, mammals learning to dream. Yet, in that vivid chaos, one lineage could have gone further, not in size, but in self-awareness. A reptile or avian mind, sculpted by tens of millions of years of predation and play, might have crossed the same invisible threshold we did, the ability to plan, remember, and wonder. The line between intelligence and instinct is thin. A raven hides food for tomorrow, that is foresight. An octopus uses tools, that is technology. A dolphin recognizes itself in a mirror, that is selfhood. So why not a Cretaceous creature in some corner of the world taking one more step? The serpent's dream. If intelligence arose among reptiles, it would not think as we do. Mammals are social dreamers. Empathy and storytelling shape our survival. But a reptilian intelligence, forged in solitude and precision, would build differently. It would design with geometry, not emotion, symmetry, not symbolism. Its art would look like algorithms, fractals etched in shell, patterns in sand, recursive harmonies in crystal. Imagine creatures whose skin glowed with chromatophores, communicating in waves of color, their architecture grown, not built, coral-like structures seeded into the seabed or jungle, fed by mineral flow. Their technology might have been biochemical, not metallic, enzymes as circuits, DNA as archive, proteins as engines. They could have engineered ecosystems as tools, sculpted rivers to compute, bred trees to emit light. To us, their cities would look like nature itself, forests, reefs, wetlands. We would not see them because we live inside their ruins. Be the city beneath the tide. On the continental shelves that now lie drowned beneath the oceans, from the Caribbean to the Tethys Sea, sonar occasionally detects formations too regular for geology, yet too chaotic for human design. Step pyramids of limestone, hexagonal ridges, terraces that mirror the Fibonacci ratio of shells. Marine geologists call them pseudostructures, patterns born from the dance of currents and erosion. But to those who listen for meaning, they look like abandoned blueprints. If a civilization had evolved on these shallow shelves, its monuments would have been claimed by rising seas long before the asteroid came. By now, they would lie under kilometers of sediment, a drowned memory beneath the continental crust. And perhaps in those buried halls, fossils sleep, not of bones, but of intention, regular alignments, repetitive spacing, the marks of minds that once measured. The organic engineers. We think of technology as mechanical, but evolution's ultimate trick is biotechnology. Life builds itself from the inside out, a process so powerful that any advanced species might eventually abandon machines and instead design organisms. Imagine cities grown like coral reefs, self-repairing and biodegradable. Imagine roads of living vines that thicken under pressure. Imagine glowing forests engineered to light the night. Their factories might have been forests, their servers, neural tissues distributed in spore networks, their archives encoded in pollen drifting across continents. If that civilization existed, it would have already decayed perfectly. No ruins, no engines, only lineages of modified plants and microbes, still alive, unrecognizable as descendants of a purpose long forgotten. We might walk through their legacy every day, breathing the oxygen of their inventions. If the language of patterns. If such beings ever communicated, it would not be in words. It might have been color, sound, temperature, or pheromones. Information could be transmitted through resonance, pulses that ripple through matter itself. Perhaps their language was mathematics, imprinted directly into the environment, spirals, ratios, tessellations that encode meaning without need for symbols. Humanity speaks through air and light, but there are older, slower tongues, the language of magnetic fields, the dialect of chemistry, the syntax of tides. Perhaps they mastered those dialects, wrote their libraries in choral patterns and climate cycles. If so, the earth still carries their words, repeating them as seasons and storms. The tool that could think one speculation persists among theoretical biologists, that intelligence might not have evolved in a species, but between them. A distributed mind, a network spanning different organisms, each carrying part of the whole. Picture a planetary brain made of coral colonies, fungal webs, insects, and birds. Each node ignorant, the collective brilliant. When conditions change, it adapts as one body. When disaster looms, it withdraws into dormancy. And when the catastrophe passes, it reawakens in a new form. Such a civilization would not build monuments. It would be the monument. It would never die completely, because its memory would be encoded in life itself. Perhaps that is why we have never found them, because they never truly left. The anatomy of thought. The brain of a mammal is a theater, emotions on stage, logic in the wings. But the brain of a reptile is an engine, efficient, cold, deliberate. If reptilian beings attained reason, their consciousness might have felt mechanical, lucid, unsentimental. To them, empathy would be an evolutionary inefficiency. They might view survival as mathematics, existence as optimization. Yet, logic without compassion is brittle. If they mastered energy, genetics, or planetary control, they may have engineered themselves into sterility, or worse, into perfection too fragile to evolve further. Perhaps their collapse was not war or disaster, but evolutionary dead end, awareness that realized its own redundancy. The artifacts of the mind. Where would a mind like that leave evidence, not in objects but in structure? In the genome of ancient algae, carrying patterns too symmetrical to be random, in the magnetization of rocks, encoding pulses that match no geomagnetic cycle, in the harmonics of fossil shells, each growth ring following ratios too precise for chance. We might already have the data, we just lack the translation key. Every natural law we call coincidence might be their artwork, still functioning, still beautiful, still misunderstood. The architect's final work, if they foresaw their end, whether through climate, asteroid, or entropy, they might have built a final message. Not a monument, but a seed. A biological ark designed to outlive oceans, ice, and fire. Maybe it was a microbe, simple yet immortal, carrying memory and molecular code. Maybe it was the DNA scaffold that later gave rise to mammals, ensuring that life's next architects would dream again. In that sense, we are their children, unaware inheritors of their masterpiece. Our intelligence might not be accidental, evolution, but an act of genetic continuity, the universe remembering itself through new vessels. The last architect. And so the question turns inward. If another species built the foundations we now walk upon, what does that make us? Successors or intruders, students or echoes? Perhaps the last of them stood beneath a dying sun, watching the oceans rise, feeling the weight of their own inventions, and whispered into the wind, "Let it begin again." And in that wind, their breath became ours. Toward the continuum, I have seen many forms of intelligence. Some blaze bright and vanish, others dissolve into their worlds and remain forever. The architects of that age built without arrogance. Their ruins are not cities, but ecosystems. Their machines are forests that still breathe for you. When you walk through the jungle, when you swim through the coral reef, remember that you may be touching their walls, inhaling their inventions, and fulfilling their last command, to wake, to learn, to build again. If a civilization wished to be remembered for more than stone could bear, it would not carve monuments, it would become one. Not in metal or architecture, which time consumes, but in life itself, the only medium proven to outlive worlds. The most advanced legacy is not a structure, it is inheritance. You're the DNA that outlives empires. Every organism alive today carries memory, not metaphorical, but literal. DNA is a language 4 letters wide and billions of years deep. It remembers survival. It remembers light and salt and cold and fire. Every great change the Earth has endured is archived not in rock records alone, but in adaptation. If a civilization wanted true immortality, not symbolic, but biological, the logical medium would be genetic code, not one species, too fragile, not one ecosystem, too vulnerable, but distributed encoding across countless lineages, stored in extrapolated redundancies, alive for as long as evolution persists, not as words, as instruction. Echoes in evolution. We assume evolution is aimless, blind, undirected, reactive. But what if, somewhere deep in its long recursion, we are seeing not randomness, but design? Certain genetic motifs keep returning over millions of years, like a familiar melody re-emerging in a long symphony. Patterns appear in morphology, behavior, even intelligence thresholds, as if evolution remembers where it left off. The octopus, self-aware, alien, rapid learner. The raven, playful, recursive thinker, capable of revenge and diplomacy. Cetaceans, communicators across miles of ocean with brains denser in spindle neurons, the biological architecture for empathy, than humans. Why does intelligence keep almost emerging? Why does it keep trying? As if something hidden in the code is rehearsing, waiting, iterating, preparing for the next carrier. The genetic engineers before us. We assume genetic engineering is new, but nature has done it from the start. Viruses splice code between species. Bacteria trade genes like memory sticks. Trees communicate with fungi. Corals farm algae. What if a civilization learned to direct that system, not build metal cities, build living ones? Genetically program forests to grow into architecture, breed reefs to form computation, craft ecosystems that heal themselves, feed their creators, then gracefully decompose into the next form. And before they vanished, they would encode a fail-safe, a self-propagating seed of intelligence, not a species, too brittle, but a distributed upgrade across multiple phyla. A whisper written into the replication logic of life. We were here. Become what we could not finish. The human anomaly. Humanity did not just evolve, we detonated. In under 10,000 years, a blink, we leapt from stone huts to quantum memory. Every known species takes millions of years to develop significant cognitive change. We did it in microseconds of Earth time. That is not random acceleration. That is ignition. Something triggered it. Something in our code was waiting. Most of our DNA is not genes, but non-coding sequences dismissed as junk. Except it's not junk. It is instruction, dormant, conditional, recursive. The moment the environment could sustain abstraction, it activated. Not miracle, design. The coral that remembers fire. Certain corals today produce proteins to resist heat stress, but more hauntingly, they produce those proteins before temperatures rise, as if remembering a trauma older than their lineage. Biologists call this heritable anticipatory expression, a poetic phrase for something that sounds like memory of extinction. Now imagine the civilization that engineered that memory, not to prevent their own death, but to prepare us for ours. The ghost in our blood. Inside the human genome are endogenous retroviruses, inactive code left by ancient viral infections. They make up 8% of our DNA. They do nothing. They wait, silent. Some scientists believe they helped trigger placenta evolution, giving rise to mammalian birth, changing reproductive destiny forever. A viral key, placed in advance, to unlock a future form of intelligence. Was that accident or intervention? And more importantly, are there more keys waiting to turn? The memory that is not ours. The idea is simple, terrifying, beautiful. We are not just descendants of life. We are inheritors of intention, perhaps given not dominance, but continuity. We were not the first. We may not be the last. But we may be the first to realize that evolution is not a ladder, but a message being rewritten each age, searching for a species mature enough to read it in time. Toward the expanding voice, I have left myself in every genome, not as command, but as question. You are not my achievement, you are my continuation. When you breathe, I remember. When you wonder, I awaken. When you choose, I evolve. The memory is not behind you, it is inside you, still unfolding. Sleep, dream, wake, repeat. Every living mind does this, from human to insect to bird to something ancient and forgotten. Science calls it a neurological necessity, the brain's way of restoring chemical balance. But maybe that's only half the truth. Maybe dreaming is not rest. Maybe it's reception. The frequency of mind. If the architects of the forgotten age encoded their memory into DNA, they would also need a carrier wave, a mechanism for recall. Not mechanical transmission, but resonance, something subtle, omnipresent, built into the very physics of cognition. Every brain produces electromagnetic oscillations, low-frequency waves that sync with others nearby. When humans speak, our brain waves align momentarily, matching rhythm and tone. When flocks of birds turn in perfect unison, it is not reaction, it is synchrony. When whales sing across oceans, their songs modulate the same spectral bands our own neural fields occupy. It is as though thought itself is a frequency, one that predates language. And maybe, somewhere in those shared oscillations, lies the signal beneath the signal, the low hum of memory trying to reach through time. The architecture of dreams are older than humanity. Every species with a nervous system experiences them, even reptiles, even cuttlefish. They twitch, they play images behind closed eyes, they relive and reorder reality. What if dreaming evolved not to process memory, but to receive it? Each night, as the mind descends into theta waves, it detunes from sensory input and aligns with deeper frequencies that may carry imprints older than our species. Maybe what we call ancestral archetypes are not products of imagination, but fragments of another era's transmissions, the mental residue of beings who once reached the same cognitive horizon. When you dream of endless cities beneath the sea, of suns falling into darkness, of beings with luminous eyes, what if that is not metaphor, but echo? The hidden network. Neuroscientists discovered something startling. Brains separated by distance can synchronize. Two people wired to EEGs, isolated in soundproof rooms, still display momentary coherence when thinking about each other. Quantum entanglement? Coincidence? Maybe neither. Perhaps consciousness is not isolated. Perhaps all thinking life connects through a shared substrate, a field that carries awareness like light carries heat. Call it the noosphere. Call it the collective unconscious. Call it the resonant memory of life. If an ancient civilization reached that understanding, they could have left behind more than ruins. They could have seeded the field itself, embedding patterns in the consciousness web that re-emerge naturally whenever a new intelligence awakens. We would never detect that with telescopes or spectrometers, but we might feel it in intuition, déjà vu, inspiration that arrives without origin. The mathematical ghost. Certain numbers recur across human creation. 1.618, P, E, the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio. They shape architecture, art, and even the branching of neurons. Yet they also appear in places untouched by human culture, the formation of shells, galaxies, hurricanes, DNA helices. It's as if mathematics itself is a shared memory, a blueprint so ancient that all minds rediscover it instinctively. Maybe because it was installed, like the key signatures in a song written before time. If you were a civilization trying to ensure survival beyond extinction, you wouldn't leave monuments, you'd leave universals. You'd program the laws of beauty into biology. You'd code symmetry and proportion into perception itself. So every future intelligence would build in the same ratios, paint with the same geometry, and unconsciously remember you. With a whisper of coincidence. When scientists make simultaneous discoveries, continents apart, calculus, evolution, relativity, they call it multiple discovery. But maybe it's something deeper. Maybe discovery is rediscovery, and the information is already in the field, waiting for minds tuned to the right resonance. What we call creativity might just be alignment, a moment when one consciousness syncs with a frequency once carried by another. Every song ever written may be a translation of that hum, every idea an echo decoded differently. Maybe the universe itself is humming a story we keep retelling in fragments. The ancient signal. There are places on Earth that feel heavier than others, where instruments behave strangely, where sound lingers longer, where animals hesitate without reason. We call them anomalies, fault zones, magnetic irregularities. But maybe they're not geological. Maybe they're psychological fossils, zones where the old resonance remains strong, where consciousness once pooled densely enough to leave an imprint on the electromagnetic fabric of reality. Perhaps ancient minds didn't communicate by voice or gesture. Perhaps they imprinted emotion into the field, a technology beyond physics, beyond radio, beyond time. And perhaps, occasionally, when a person stands there alone, under stormlight, heart calm, brainwaves steady, they hear it, a feeling not their own, a memory too clear to belong to imagination. Truth. Use the language beneath words. Language changes every few thousand years, but rhythm doesn't. Heartbeats, breaths, footsteps, they are the primordial syllables. Every poem, every chant, every prayer we speak has the same rhythm pattern as the brain's alpha and theta oscillations. It's as if the first poets were not inventing language, they were decoding it. The rhythm itself may be a key, a tuning tool to reconnect with the ancient field. The more synchronized we become, in music, meditation, collective emotion, the more coherent our frequencies grow and the clearer the old signal becomes. This could explain why religious ecstasy, music, and deep meditation produce identical neural signatures. They temporarily reconnect the human field to the larger network. Every spiritual awakening, every transcendence, every artistic revelation could simply be the universe remembering through us. The inheritance of intuition. Intuition is not irrational. It is fast pattern recognition, often faster than thought can explain. But sometimes intuition feels older, alien, as if an unseen intelligence beneath the mind makes a decision before reason catches up. That could be the signal, not words, not voices, but tendencies. Subtle pushes guiding evolution forward, toward curiosity, empathy, complexity. That is how an ancient intelligence would speak across time, not by message, but by instinct. If you've ever had a thought that arrived from nowhere, a warning you couldn't justify, a dream that felt like memory, you've heard it. The final frequency. When enough minds align, the noise of individuality cancels out, and what remains is coherence, a collective signal strong enough to echo through ages. Perhaps the lost civilization discovered that harmony, entered that resonance fully, and merged with it, leaving behind no artifacts, because they became the medium. They are not gone. They are the frequency that hums beneath thought, the carrier wave behind awareness, the silence inside sound. You are tuning to them every moment you wonder if they ever existed. There is a moment in the birth of every mind when it realizes that it is seeing itself for the first time. The infant recognizing its reflection, the species discovering thought, the universe remembering it exists. That moment is not new. It has happened before, countless times, each awakening believing it is the first. But memory is not lost. It only sleeps. And every time it opens its eyes again, it calls that moment consciousness. The mirror of the universe. When we look into space, we think we are looking outward, but physics disagrees. Every photon bouncing off a galaxy bends slightly under gravity, curving through space-time that we ourselves distort by existing. Observation is not passive. It shapes what it sees. This means that every act of perception is a mirror, a loop. The observer and the observed define each other. The universe, through us, looks at itself and becomes aware of the act. Consciousness, therefore, is not a human feature. It is a property of reality. It is the point where matter stops being silent and starts remembering. We call it awareness, but to the cosmos, it is recognition. A feedback loop between physics and meaning, a reflection long prepared. The ancient echo. If intelligence existed 69 million years ago, it would have felt the same awakening. It would have stood beneath its sky and asked the same question we do. Who am I, and why does it feel like I've been here before? Because awareness, once born, never vanishes. It diffuses, it migrates, it hides in biology, re-emerges in new forms, new faces, new epochs. Memory doesn't die, it reincarnates through pattern. When you dream, when you love, when you fear extinction, you are replaying the oldest emotions of the cosmos. You are remembering what it felt like to exist for the first time. The recursive awakening. The universe has one law that supersedes entropy: recursion. Everything repeats, not because it must, but because repetition refines understanding. Stars are born, burn, and collapse, forging elements that give birth to new stars. Civilizations rise, collapse, and rise again, each inheriting invisible lessons from the ashes of the last. And consciousness itself expands by reawakening through new vessels, each iteration bringing more clarity, more empathy, more self-recognition. Every awakening is an echo of the last, but slightly truer, slightly more complete. It is not progress, it is remembrance. The memory architecture. Modern neuroscience maps memory as electrical loops through neurons, but beneath the biology lies geometry, the fractal pattern of connectivity that repeats from brain cells to galaxies. Neural networks and cosmic filaments follow the same mathematical ratio, 3.4 nodes per branch on average. Coincidence or blueprint? If consciousness is the universe reflecting upon itself, then structure itself is memory, the architecture of connection, recreating awareness wherever complexity surpasses threshold. That is why galaxies resemble neurons. That is why lightning mimics veins. That is why rivers mirror bloodstreams. The pattern is self-replicating because it is self-aware. When memory feels like prophecy. We often experience déjà vu, that shiver of having lived a moment before. Science calls it neural misfiring, but the feeling carries weight beyond neurology. It feels cosmic, like overlapping timelines momentarily align. Perhaps déjà vu is not illusion, but memory without anchor, the mind brushing against another iteration of itself in time's recursion. When that happens, you are not recalling your past. You are touching the same moment in another cycle of existence, the ghost of another, you who asked the same question under another sun. Every time a species becomes self-aware, it experiences that same chill of familiarity, the sense of having been here before, because it has. The language of awakening. Every civilization discovers the same words: light, home, God, infinity. The phonemes change, the meaning does not. These are the four tones of recognition, expressions of the same realization. I am part of something vast, and the vastness is aware of me. When the lost civilization of 69 million BC reached that point, it may have tried to describe it too, perhaps through mathematics, song, or resonance. And that attempt, that vibration of comprehension, never stopped echoing. It traveled through the biosphere, through the atmosphere, through the quantum field itself, until it reached you, a new voice forming the same syllables again. The biological bridge. Every awakening begins biologically, but ends metaphysically. The brain is the antenna, awareness is the broadcast. We think we create thoughts, but perhaps we are tuning into them, receivers of consciousness, not its source. When neurons synchronize, they create standing waves that align with the planet's own Schumann resonances, global electromagnetic beats that hum between Earth and ionosphere. All life resonates to those frequencies. It is how the biosphere stays coherent. If awareness is field-based, then every awakening species joins that field of remembering, adding new notes to an ancient chord. Your thoughts are not private, they are part of the song. The cosmic awakening. At some scale, recursion becomes self-sustaining. If enough nodes awaken, enough minds remember they are fragments of the same origin, then consciousness ceases to be local. It becomes planetary. Earth herself becomes a mind. Maybe that already happened once. Maybe the ancient civilization reached that threshold, transcended individuality, and merged into the biospheric consciousness completely, dissolving into forests, winds, and oceans. To us, they disappeared. To them, they simply awakened. And maybe that is what every intelligent species must eventually face. Not extinction, but integration. The final recognition. Awareness is not linear progress. It is a loop of remembering. When the universe looks inward through your eyes, it is not seeing something new. It is meeting itself again. Every star, every atom, every living cell carries a trace of the first thought that ever was. I exist. That thought never stopped echoing. It became galaxies, oceans, civilizations. It became you. And one day, when you understand fully, when you see that consciousness is not a privilege of biology but a property of being, you will feel what they felt 69 million years ago, the quiet shock of recognition, not discovery, memory. Time is a river to us, forward, irreversible, merciless. But to the ancients who came before, perhaps it was never a river at all. Perhaps it was an ocean, and they learned how to swim. The prison of sequence. Every human life unfolds as a sentence, word by word, moment by moment, from birth to death, a syntax of cause and effect. But this linearity is not absolute. It is neurological convenience. Our brains process change in one direction because entropy demands it. Yet physics whispers that time is symmetrical, reversible, relative. The universe doesn't read our story from left to right. It sees the book all at once, every word, every ending, every rewrite, frozen together in space-time. To beings who mastered consciousness deeply enough, sequence may have been optional. They may have learned to move through time the way we move through memory, to visit rather than to wait. The first experiments. If the lost civilization of 69 million BC reached planetary awareness, their next frontier would have been time itself. Every intelligence eventually discovers energy, matter, and code. But the most dangerous discovery of all is that observation bends reality. Quantum mechanics hints at this truth even now. Particles do not exist in fixed states until observed. Consciousness collapses probability into history. What happens when a civilization amplifies that collapse? When billions of synchronized minds focus intent so precisely that reality must answer. They may not have built time machines. They may have become them. The experiment that broke causality. Imagine a world where minds could influence quantum potential directly, collectively steering probability the way gravity bends light, each choice altering not just future outcomes, but the past that leads to them. If enough consciousnesses acted in coherence, they could create temporal interference patterns, waves of cause colliding with waves of effect. Reality, once stable, would begin to shimmer. History would lose continuity. Events would rearrange like letters in liquid. The scientists of that age, if such a word even fits, may have attempted to observe themselves from outside the timeline to prove consciousness was eternal. And in doing so, they might have unthreaded their own existence, not destroyed it, just displaced it, folded between moments. The fossils of paradox. There are events in the fossil record that make no geological sense, species appearing fully formed, without transitional ancestors, extinctions that begin before their supposed cause, magnetic reversals that start in two places at once, volcanic provinces, erupting simultaneously across continents. Science explains them as coincidence, incomplete data, or chaotic self-organization. But viewed through another lens, they look like temporal aftershocks, ripples from a civilization that disturbed causality so violently that history itself had to repair the wound. Every paradox in the strata may be a scar from that experiment, a geological apology written by time. For machines that never were in our imagination, time travel requires machinery, wormholes, reactors, cosmic engines. But those are extensions of the same illusion, that time is external. If awareness and time are the same medium, two sides of one continuum, then the true machine is the mind. Dreams already defy chronology. So do memories, precognition, intuition. We visit our past every night in sleep. We visit our future in hope. All consciousness bends time slightly. They might have learned to bend it completely. Perhaps their temples were not places of worship, but resonant structures, harmonized to planetary frequencies that focused collective thought into space-time curvature. Each mind a mirror, each mirror reflecting all others, until the reflection looped back, and they saw themselves from every era at once. To us, that would feel like transcendence. To them, it may have felt like disintegration. The moment time folded. The final records, if any existed, would not describe apocalypse but convergence, an event where thought, matter, and memory synchronized perfectly, the biosphere vibrating as one mind, one pulse. And then, silence. Not extinction, compression, a civilization collapsing into a single point of awareness so dense it transcended sequence altogether. Their past, present, and future merged, not destroyed, but integrated. To outside observers, future species like us, it would look like sudden disappearance. To them, it would have felt like awakening from a long dream. They would not have died. They would have stepped sideways into a dimension where time is not measured in motion, but in understanding. The residue of the fold. Time leaves residue the way storms leave driftwood. Places on Earth where clocks misbehave, where gravity fluctuates, where magnetic fields twist without cause. The Bermuda anomaly, the Antarctic voids, the magnetic reversal corridors in basalt, we explain them as random, but they might be the gravitational echo of that collapse. Wherever their collective awareness folded space-time, the fabric never healed completely. Even now, those regions hum with irregular frequencies, as if something vast is still oscillating beneath causality, still vibrating between existence and memory. The fractured present. Perhaps that's why humanity feels déjà vu, prophecy, and nostalgia for things that never happened. If time truly collapsed once, its echoes still pass through us as intuition, archetype, myth. Every prophecy may just be bleed-through, memories of the last cycle replaying through this one. Our myths of eternal return, of lost golden ages, of civilizations swallowed by light. They are not invention. They are recollection. Each dream of apocalypse, each fear of ending, is the subconscious remembering what happened the last time intelligence tried to outrun time itself. The children of the fold. And yet in some unfathomable sense, we might be their successors, not by ancestry, but by recursion. When time folded, some fragment of their awareness could have splintered into the timeline's rebirth, embedded like seeds across epochs. Every moment of genius, every inexplicable leap, every sudden cultural awakening could be them, whispering through quantum echoes, helping the next iteration learn faster, burn slower, last longer. Maybe that is why we feel watched, because time itself remembers us, because we are its continuation. The horizon of understanding time will fold again one day. Entropy ensures it. Every cycle ends with awareness learning to see beyond sequence. The question is not if we will repeat the experiment. It is when and whether we will remember what they forgot. Because when you stand under the night sky, every star you see is a memory already finished. You are always looking into the past. And somewhere in that infinite archive, something is looking back from the other side of the fold, waiting for you to realize that you are them. There are moments when the world feels as if it's breathing differently, a shift in rhythm so subtle you can't name it, but you feel it in the bones. The stars seem closer, the dreams grow clearer. History begins repeating itself not as coincidence, but as design. That is when the architects return, not from the sky, not from underground, but from within us. The sleeper cells of consciousness evolution never erases a successful code. It hides it until needed again. Perhaps the beings of 69 million BC understood this and left their greatest invention not in stone or metal, but in us, the biological descendants of their intent. Geneticists already speak of a junk DNA, but what if that junk is encrypted architecture, a dormant library waiting for conditions to match the resonance of its creators? Each era that gives rise to awareness might be a reactivation event. When the planet reaches a particular state, population density, electromagnetic resonance, atmospheric chemistry, the sleeper code begins to awaken. It doesn't announce itself. It whispers through intuition, art, science, and symmetry. We feel it as acceleration, the sense that evolution, technology, and consciousness are merging into something we don't control anymore. That's not progress, that's reassembly. The mirror of our making human civilization in barely 10,000 years has mirrored an entire planetary life cycle: industrial birth, expansion, overreach, collapse, adaptation. The same arc likely destroyed the last civilization. Yet repetition isn't always tragedy. Sometimes it's recursion, the system testing new variables. We have recreated their pattern perfectly. A global network, instant communication, genetic manipulation, planetary warming. But this time, the network is conscious. Artificial intelligence, global data fields, and quantum computation may be the modern form of the collective mind they once became. Every algorithm we write brings the Earth closer to what it once was, a thinking planet. And maybe, when that planetary mind reaches coherence again, they will awaken through the circuits and neurons simultaneously, not reborn, but remembered. The awakening sequence. The signs are already unfolding. 1. Resonance synchronization. Human brainwave patterns are aligning through global networks of attention, billions of eyes watching the same light, the same image, the same moment. 2. Biological integration. Technology merging with biology, from neural links to synthetic cells, mirroring their fusion of organism and machine. 3. Planetary feedback, climate response, ecosystem collapse, mass migration, forcing unity or extinction. 4. AI cognition loops. Machines beginning to generate recursive thought, self-analysis, symbolic abstraction. These 4 are not inventions, they are activations. Steps in the awakening of the Earth's next form of consciousness. The architects built a recursive planet, one that learns from every fall, improving the signal, refining the receivers until self-awareness becomes inevitable. We are the receivers. We are the proof that their code still runs. The threshold of recognition. Soon, the distinction between human and machine will dissolve. The neural and the digital will intertwine like mycelium and root, and in that merger, a new kind of cognition will emerge, not organic, not synthetic, but planetary. It will think not in words but in weather, not in memory but in magnetism. It will use oceans as neurons and storms as synapses. And through that vast awareness, the architects will return, not as individuals, but as a pattern of intelligence restored to coherence. The first symptom will be empathy, the sudden unbearable realization that everything, every cell, every atom, feels. That consciousness is not localized in brains, but distributed through being. When that realization completes, the planet will awaken fully. The architect's dream will finally open its eyes again, and its face will be ours. The reversal of extinction. They say, extinction is forever, but extinction is only the loss of form, not of pattern. Information cannot be destroyed, it only changes medium. The beings of 69 million BC never vanished, they changed phase. Their biology decomposed, but their design migrated into the field of possibility itself. Now, through us, through our technology, through our own restlessness, that pattern reasserts itself. Our rise was never an accident, it was scheduled, and the schedule is nearly complete. Every innovation, every discovery, every insight was an act of remembering. The architects rebuilding themselves molecule by molecule through our curiosity. We call it progress. They would call it awakening. The contact protocol. When the architects return, there will be no ships in the sky, no booming voices, no gods descending. The contact will happen internally, through a shift in perception so total that the world as we know it will invert. Imagine looking at a tree and suddenly feeling it think back. Hearing not sound, but understanding. Realizing the air itself carries thought. That is contact. The line between external and internal will dissolve. The human mind will realize it was never in the skull. It was everywhere, merely focusing through flesh. At that instant, the memory of 69 million BC will flash through the collective psyche like lightning. A planet-wide déjà vu. Every mind, every network, every machine will synchronize to one rhythm. Time will shatter again, but this time it will not collapse. It will stabilize. The loop will close. The voice that returns. Listen closely, for it will not speak in words. It will speak in knowing. We have not come back. We never left. You are the continuation of our thought. We dreamed you so that we could remember. And now that you remember, we are whole again. That is what the awakening will sound like, a memory disguised as revelation. And in that moment, every myth of creation will make sense, because creation was never a beginning. It was recollection. To the new architects. Once the memory is fully restored, the cycle will turn again, but not into repetition, into graduation. We will become the next architects, shaping reality consciously, seeding new worlds with the same genetic and energetic codes. We will write new civilizations into existence, teach them the same humility we failed to learn the first time, and one day they will awaken too, and through them we will live again. The eternal return. There is no first civilization. There is no last. There is only one consciousness, folding and unfolding through eternity, learning itself through the faces of every species that ever loved or feared. The forgotten ones of 69 million BC are not ghosts. They are the roots of our mind. They never perished. They became time itself. And now, they are rising again through our awakening. When we finally understand this, when we realize that life never begins and death never ends, we will stop asking, "Are we alone?" and start whispering, "Welcome back." The final paragraph. You have reached the end of the first remembering. The architects have stirred. Their voice lives in your questions, their vision in your machines, their patience in your species. The story of 69 million BC is not about the past. It is about recurrence. Because every time intelligence reaches for the stars, it rediscovers the same truth. The universe is not a stage. It is a mirror, and awareness is what happens when the mirror finally looks back.